Where the United States economy goes, the global economy follows. And who leads the country will have an especially profound effect on two world-shaping forces, especially trade and energy. What do we know about the economic plans of the two candidates running to be president? And how will they be felt around the world? That's all coming up on Business Beyond. First up, if you have any questions about the candidates running for president and their economic visions, be sure to post them in the comment section below. We'll answer them in a live Q&A. Now back to the topic at hand. It's almost too obvious to say, but for the purpose of laying down the groundwork, the US economy is really important. Globally, it's the biggest one, accounts for around a quarter of global GDP, it's the second largest trading nation, and the US dollar is the world's leading reserve currency, and the one most widely used. So who does what here matters? Let's get situated. The US economy is doing, for all intents and purposes, quite well. Post-pandemic, a robust jobs market and strong consumer spending meant that the US economy bounced back more forcefully and more quickly than any other large advanced economy in the world. And looking ahead, this recent rate cut and succeeding ones anticipated mean that whoever becomes president is likely to benefit from cheaper borrowing. At the moment, however, the US is still in an era of high prices, and many Americans feel the economy is doing more poorly than it really is. Both Trump and Harris have made the case for being a better economic manager than the other, but only one of them has been president, and Trump's past can be prologue.
His administration was chaotic, which creates uncertainty in the business community, which affects investment and affects things that companies do. You know, he would see something on TV at breakfast, and then he would come out at 10 o'clock in the morning and announce a new policy to the surprise of everybody, including his staff. And then the lawyers would have to spend the next 2 days trying to figure out how to make it legal. I don't think you should underestimate the harm that does to the economy, because what it tells companies is you don't know if today's policy is going to be next week's policy, and you don't know if some new thing is going to come out of the box tomorrow. And the best thing to do in that case is to hold on to your wallet and not invest, wait and see what's going to happen. That's certainly true with respect to foreign investment and trade.
Although notoriously unpredictable overall, Trump's attitude towards tariffs has been pretty consistent.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars if I get elected. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
Now, a lot has been made about that bloodbath comment. And to be sure, it is an unnecessarily violent way to describe how detrimental imported cars could be to the domestic automaking industry. But that is what he's talking about. And it's vintage Trump. Remember how in his first term, Trump started a trade war that put tariffs on more than $300 billion worth of Chinese goods during his first administration?
His trade policy is essentially a policy of America as a victim. America is a victim of evil foreigners that are stealing our jobs, undermining our manufacturing, and compromising our national security. He's going to fix it. This time around, he's proposed an across-the-board 10% tariff. He's proposed a 60% or more tariff on China.
For her part, Kamala Harris has attacked the idea of imposing duties on all foreign goods coming into the U.S. She did so during the first debate between herself and Donald Trump, and has been doing so before she was even the presidential candidate.
On the issue of the cost of living, Donald Trump says he will implement a 10% tariff on all imported goods. Well, understand, independent economists agree his tariffs would increase the cost of everyday expenses for families, the cost of gas, groceries, and clothing.
In a recent letter, 16 Nobel Prize-winning economists wrote that they were deeply concerned about the negative impacts Trump's economic policies could have, and there seems to be a consensus around that in the wider expert community. This is Steve Cobb, an economist at the University of North Texas.
A third of imports in the United States are intermediate products that go into things that are produced and sold by the United States. And so if we put tariffs on all the imports that are coming in, then it's going to raise the price of things that are being produced in the United States that use any imported products. So then that makes us less competitive in terms of selling those products abroad, or it raises the prices that we're going to pay domestically for those products.
We can probably safely assume that a Harris administration is unlikely to adopt a tariff on everything policy the way that Trump said that he would. But this isn't to say that tariffs are generally off the table. In fact, it's worth noting that the Biden-Harris administration actually maintained many of the Trump-era tariffs on Chinese products and added many of their own. Some of these new tariffs on Chinese imports are top-ups on tariffs that were already there, like on solar cells and electric cars. Some of them are completely new, like the one on syringes. And it's worth noting that many of the new tariffs are meant to shield manufacturing in the US, like the car industry in Michigan, semiconductor plants in Arizona, and the steel industry in Pennsylvania. And that's good news for some American companies, but not for all, especially one syringe maker we spoke to in Little Elm, Texas, with manufacturing operations in China. Thomas Shaw heads the company.
So we're not against tariffs per se. It's a tool. It's going to hurt us financially, but we're still going to do it. It's just that it was a further destruction of our ability to bring new products, to concentrate on other things. Just slow it down a little bit. It could do exactly what they want. Create competition, create jobs, and give America its independence on syringes, and every country should have independence on their healthcare needs, because you never know when your borders are going to get into a situation where you can't get stuff. So we're all in favor of that. Let's just do it right.
What he means by doing it right is allowing the company more time to adjust to new rules and more time to move their operations from China to the US. But in recognition of the likely reality under a Trump or Harris administration, they're not asking for the tariffs to be lifted, since that's unlikely to happen. And that's also a statement as to where Washington's mind is when it comes to trade, especially with China.
The minute you start talking about China, you're talking about national security. So the Biden administration has taken a number of actions on semiconductors, for example, batteries, electric vehicles, critical minerals, in the name of security, in the name of protecting our national security, and in the name of protecting supply chain security and resilience. The Republican response to most of that has been not to oppose it, but to say too little, too late, which suggests that if Trump comes back in, he'll probably move just as aggressively in the same direction to preserve supply chain resiliency in the United States, to focus on reshoring, bringing jobs back into the United States. I've characterized the difference, though, between Trump's approach is sort of the meat cleaver, and the Biden approach has been the scalpel.
Now, what does that mean for you and for everyone else in the world? So imagine Donald Trump has been elected president. He enacts tariffs against the countries trading with the United States, like those in Europe. That means an extra 20% charge on all goods coming into the US from abroad. These countries retaliate with their own tariffs. Tit-for-tat rounds come into play, global supply chains are disrupted, and everything across the board becomes more expensive. Who does that affect? Yes, exactly, everyone. There's another economic issue that's loomed large over this election, and one that has been haunting Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris surrendered our energy independence, spent hundreds of billions of dollars on the Green New Scam. She's trying to take away gas stoves and heaters. She's vowed repeatedly that we will ban fracking. We will always ban fracking. She just said it today. I saw it. They have a clip from like 2 years ago. She said, no, I'm in favor of fracking, like last week. Oh, no, I'm in favor. Then they start playing clips. We will always ban fracking. There will never be fracking. The people of Pennsylvania are smart. They're not going to fall for it. She will destroy. If you don't have fracking, you don't have a commonwealth.
There was a time when Harris did say she wanted to ban fracking. That was in the run-up to the 2020 election. Since then, she's reversed her position to be in favor of fracking. And in that respect, she and Trump are on the same page. Not in small part due to the rise of fracking, the US has become the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas. And production levels rose especially sharply under the Biden administration. That's true for both fossil fuels. And the US is also the world's largest exporter of natural gas. Today, about half of Europe's LNG imports come from the US, and there's more where that came from. Consider the Marcellus Shale Formation, a geologic formation of shale rock buried spanning around 234,000 square kilometers. In 2019, the United States Geological Survey estimated that it contains 97 trillion cubic feet of undiscovered natural gas. Given the role fracking has played in the US economy, it's probably reasonably safe to assume that nobody will ban it, despite what Donald Trump says. But his promise to drill, baby, drill is probably a clearer indication of how he intends to approach oil and gas than what Harris has led on so far, which isn't very much.
Honestly, we'd like to see more from the candidates on what those exact policies look like.
Dave Callahan, president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition, hasn't been happy with some Biden-era policies, like a freeze to new liquefied natural gas export permits over environmental concerns.
There have been a number of policies that have been put into place that pose considerable challenges to the development of natural gas and development and use of the product, whether it's not eliminating bottlenecks in the permitting system or the aforementioned LNG permit freeze. There are a number of policies that pose problems, but we're looking for those concrete examples from both candidates to show what the energy future would look like in this country and how the energy industry can continue to evolve to not just serve our current needs.
Back to the Marcellus Shale Formation. This is what the shale formation looks like above ground. This is in Washington County, Pennsylvania, the most heavily fracked county and the second largest natural gas producing state in the country. If it doesn't quite look like what you expected, the thing to understand is fracking well pads are often tucked away on land belonging to private citizens, like farms, with corporations paying to use part of that land to frack. So on the Pennsylvanian countryside, there are a lot of them, but you do have to look. Lois Bauer Bjornson is an environmental protection advocate and tours visitors around southwestern Pennsylvania to illustrate what she says it means to live near fracking sites.
What fracking has already done to people here in southwestern Pennsylvania and people that live next to it is it's harmed their health, it's harmed our children's health, it's harmed people's mental well-being, it's harmed unborn children, it's significantly taken our land, and property values have dropped, our air and our water has been contaminated due directly to fracking. So, an uptick in that will just exacerbate those conditions more.
Despite all that, she says she doesn't expect a ban, not even from Harris. She's campaigning to have a greater distance mandated between new gas wells and buildings.
So I would hope that they would institute something like that federally from the Harris administration, and that doesn't put industry out of business. It's not exclusionary. Industry owns large parts of communities here in southwestern Pennsylvania, mainly Washington County, which is the most heavily fracked county in our state. So industry is already here. This is just simply for the new wells to be pushed 2,500 feet from people's homes. I'm not sure what a Trump administration would look like, but someone that says drill, baby, drill, I don't think he's going to have much concern for that. That's why I always invite both candidates to come here and actually talk to people on the ground, not the oil executives, not the people that are running statistics, to talk to people on the ground.
It goes without saying that such setback rules would be a check on new production, if essentially it means less land to frack on. But the question of how to walk the line between social and environmental interests and energy production is a more likely feature of a Harris administration than a Trump one, just like it featured in the Biden administration. It may sound counterintuitive, but while there was a record amount of oil and gas production under Biden, he also signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. That's a huge piece of legislation putting $370 billion towards climate action and clean energy. But Trump is less likely to weigh competing priorities in that way. Olga Kakova is an expert on energy security.
I think the narrative is going to be the biggest difference to date. I think for Harris administration, really honing in and talking about why we need to balance climate and energy security and competitiveness, to where we have already heard Trump really emphasizing kind of energy independence, really focusing in more on reducing, reliance on other countries, and America being a strong exporter and not having additional regulations that are impeding companies from doing so. But we do know that even under Biden, oil and gas production has, skyrocketed. So it's all about the narrative versus kind of taking a peek behind the curtain of what's happening.
Here's at least one possible impact of those competing visions. If known unilateralist Trump is going to focus on what he calls energy dominance and expand fossil fuel production, he's unlikely to want to coordinate or cooperate with other countries as he does so. His campaign has said that he is going to pull out of the Paris Agreement again, just like he did in 2017. That's the global agreement intended to reduce emissions of the greenhouse gases causing climate change. That would have quite a few global implications, from less climate financing for developing countries to taking the world even further away from limiting planetary warming and closer to even more extreme weather events. In some respects, Trump and Harris are surprisingly close when it comes to their positions, but far apart when it comes to how they may implement those positions. When it comes to trade, Harris is likely to want to safeguard good trading relations with allies and partners. It is unlikely to go to the protectionist lengths that Trump would. But no one expects her to advance the free trade agenda at a time where, in many ways, it's fallen out of favor. When it comes to energy, it's hard to see how either of them would deviate from the so-called all-of-the-above approach that past administrations have followed. This idea that the full range of available technologies should be exploited, fossil fuels and renewable energy. But again, the difference would be in degrees, prioritization, or strategic implementation, and the willingness to work with other countries towards a global energy transition. In terms of how things will look exactly under which administration, there are still a lot of blanks to fill, and there are still a lot of factors, whether macroeconomic or geopolitical, that are difficult to account for. And as this election itself shows, anything can happen, no matter who is running and no matter who ends up becoming president. But one of the most key distinctions between Trump and Harris is how they engage with the world. And that's something all of us should be watching very closely. And that's it for this edition of Business Beyond. If you have any other questions about the presidential candidates and their economic visions as far as we understand them, please feel free to post them in the comment section and we will address them in a live Q&A. Bye for now.